I always knew that if I was going to be anything or anybody in life, I needed to know God and I needed to know Him for real. Hey y'all, this is Ricky Watson, host of the Scriptures Revealed podcast, and I am excited to just have a conversation with you guys on YouTube. It's going to be phenomenal. And I just wanted to have the opportunity and the space just to kind of talk to you guys and share with you my journey through the scriptures, my journey in my relationship with God, and my journey to how I developed this hunger and developed this appetite for the Word of God. It is probably the number one question I get is that when people try to engage me with questions or different things, the number one thing I'm going to get is, how do you get revelation from the scriptures? And how did you develop this hunger for the Word of God? Or how did you maintain this all your life? And the secret is, I'm gonna be really blunt and open and honest about it. It didn't always keep me from making bad decisions or bad choices, but it did always anchor me. And so that's why I believe that everybody should have a hunger and a thirst for the Word of God, for the scriptures, for a relationship with God, not because it's going to make you perfect, but it is going to keep you anchored. For me, growing up, the first thing that I fell in love with was church. And I know that's like taboo or whatnot to be a church kid, church boy. But for me, I was in the church all the time, every day, for everything. Not because I wanted to be a super Christian or to be super religious or anything like that. I was in church because for me, it was a safe haven. It was a place for dreams. It was a place for possibilities. It was a place where hopes were there and the possibility of that hope coming alive and you living in the reality of whatever that hope may be. Because what I learned about God is that as long as you relied on Him, or as long as you decided to put your trust in Him, that it became possible for anything that He would speak to you for it to become a reality. And that excited me. And because of that, what I instantly connected it to was the scriptures. I know for some people, they connect the beginnings of their relationship with God to the gifts of the Spirit or a prophetic word or miracles happening. But before any of that, I fell in love with the Word of God. And it was out of my love for the Word that I began to have faith for miracles, faith for healings, faith for prophecy, faith for even casting out devils. All of that stuff came as a launching pad from the scriptures. It changed my life. I remember growing up in church, and at the time when I initially came into church, my father wasn't in church, my mother wasn't in church. I was in church because my great-grandmother was in church, because my great-grandfather had started a church as a result of a revival that came to this little small country town. I mean, he was an evangelist, just came, had a meeting, and then the meeting never stopped. And people were getting healed and saved and delivered in this little town. And so as a result of that, he started a church, built the church with his own hands, built the church. And my great-grandmother kind of helped him build the church and helped establish the church. And once I came along, my great-grandmother then pulled me in the church because nobody at that stage of the game, as talking about the grandchildren or the great-grandchildren, weren't heavily involved in it. But I became involved in it, and as a result of it, my parents got involved in church. But what intrigued me the most was not the preaching, was not the shouting and dancing, was not the falling out. What intrigued me the most was that every week, we were opening up a book that I was being taught that the more you opened it and the more you got into it, you were going to be introduced to God. Now, I know we throw that term and that name around a lot, but I think it's time for everybody just to kind of take a moment and think about that what we say about the Bible, the book. It has the ability, almost like being in a house and there are no windows in the house except this one little window. And this one little window kind of gives you a small view of what's going on outside. And that's what the Bible is like. It's like there are no other windows out there in this house of your life that you live in, but this little window called the Bible. And when you look in it, you get a view of what God is really like. You get a view of this God who calls himself the Ancient of Days on some pages of the book, and on other pages he's called a consuming fire, and on other pages he's called a man of war. And then there are titles about him at being living water and bread of life and all of these different things. And then you get into the prophetic books, and then you learn that he's riding on the wind, and then his chariot is the back of angels, and then sometimes he moves and transports from one location to the other on clouds. I'm telling you, people who are enamored by fantasy novels and stuff, I'm like, if you get in the Bible, it is full of things that far supersede fantasy, far supersede myths or Greek mythology and all of that stuff. You can get a variety of different things just by getting in the scriptures. And so I became enamored by it. And I remembered, for me, one of my earliest prayers I've prayed since as far back as I can remember is, God, I want a relationship with you, but I do not want to build a relationship with the God that I created in my head. You know, religion, when you hear people talk about it, it's almost like it's okay for you to craft your own religion and to kind of craft your own relationship with God and craft what it looks like and come up with the rules and the boundaries and the parameters for it. Even though there's some truth to that, it really is, I think you have to walk a fine line when it comes to how much of this is left up to my creativity, and then how do I make sure that the God I'm saying is speaking to me is the real God of the Bible? How do I make sure that the God I'm claiming to give me dreams and the God I'm claiming to direct my life, how do I make sure that I'm in real harmony with the God that I read about in the scriptures? And I think the way you do that is falling in love with the book. And that is exactly what I've done. All through these years, I've just developed a love for it, not because I wanted to make an idol out of the book. Now, this is something that if I was talking to you just one-on-one, sitting down with you, I would caution you with this, is that you have to be careful and walk a real fine line between falling in love with the Word of God and then making the Bible an idol in your life. And I think that's what happens when you are following God and pursuing God and developing your relationship with Him. You have to be very careful that the book does not become an idol and that the book becomes exactly what I talked about a few moments ago. It's a window. It's an opening. It's a door to knowing and coming into fellowship with God. One of the things that happened even in the scriptures when Jesus came to the planet, and he came in contact with the religious leaders, the teachers of the day, the Pharisees and the Sadducees and of that day. Those were the religious people that claimed to know the book, but they missed the one who authored the book, not because they didn't honor the book, but it was because they made the book an idol. Jesus even said, you guys search the scriptures, but you don't search them to find me. Because if you really search them right, you would have bumped into me. You would have encountered me. You would have known that when you looked me in the eye, you would have said, that look is something familiar. When you saw me and you encountered me in the temple, you would have said, this presence feels awfully similar to something I've experienced before, because that is what the book was supposed to do. It was supposed to open up to you God's world. And so Jesus said, you guys have missed all that I've made available to you because you made an idol out of something that was supposed to be a door, and you made an idol out of something that was supposed to be a window for you. And it is time for us to put the book right where it needs to be, in its proper placement, giving it its proper glory and honor, but not forgetting that the purpose of the book is to open up the world called God. God himself is a world. God himself is an entire universe. And the purpose of the Bible is to open you up to God's world. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you were blessed. If you wasn't, then maybe you should try watching it again. It was really good. But you want to be sure you're not missing out on anything coming in the future. So hit that bell down below and make sure you are subscribed and getting all of your notifications. You want to be here as we just have conversations about the scriptures being revealed in our lives.